up on this Tuesday edition of Newsline at Noon. The leaders of South Korea and Vietnam agreed to resume FTA negotiations next month in the hope of signing a deal next year. President Park Geun-hye garners Hanoi's support for her envisioned trust-building process with North Korea. After restoring their military hotline near the West Sea, the two Koreas are hopeful about nailing down a date for the reopening of their industrial park during their second joint committee meeting today. Plus, Russia urges Syria to turn in its stockpile of chemical weapons to prevent a U.S. military strike. The Syrian government has welcomed the idea, while U.S. President Barack Obama calls it a potential breakthrough. These stories and more on Newsline at Noon.
Where's the best place for bibimbap?
Les Jeux Olympiques d'hiver se dérouleront-ils à Pyeongchang?
هل أنتم حقاً سابع أكبر مصدر في العالم؟
この歌手は誰ですか？你好，最近哪部电视剧的人气最旺？
Korea is attracting interest from around the world. The more you know, the more you want to know. Dynamic Korea.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at Noon. I'm Chae Yuson in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. We start things off in Vietnam, where President Park Geun-hye and her Vietnamese counterpart agreed to speed up negotiations for a bilateral free trade agreement to be signed next year.
The two leaders also agreed to boost Korea's participation in Vietnam's energy and infrastructure projects. Our presidential correspondent Oh Jin-ju reports.
Korea and Vietnam agreed to accelerate FTA talks so that the deal can be signed sometime next year. President Park Geun-hye and Vietnamese President Truong Tan Sang, during their bilateral summit on Monday, decided to hold two additional FTA rounds of negotiations this year, with the first one set to take place in October, which will be the third round of their trade talks. Under the regulatory structure of the FTA, the two leaders also agreed to work towards expanding bilateral trade to $70 billion by the year 2020, which is more than triple the figure reached last year. The energy and resources sector is another important area of cooperation. The two countries decided to continue working together in nuclear power plant development, with Vietnam planning to build 10 nuclear reactors by the year 2030.
우리 두 정상은 한국의 원전 개발 경험과 기술을 공유하는 것이 베트남 원전 산업 육성에 기여한다는 데 인식을 같이 하였습니다.
The Vietnamese president also vowed to support Korean companies so that they could take part in its other energy infrastructure projects, such as construction of thermal power plants and oil storage facilities. With regard to North Korea, the two leaders made it clear that they will not tolerate Pyongyang's possession of nuclear weapons. President Sang showed support for President Park's trust-building process with North Korea and her vision for a multilateral dialogue process in Northeast Asia. President Park will continue on with her sales diplomacy on Tuesday during her visit to Vietnam's largest economic city of Ho Chi Minh. There, she's scheduled to meet with high-ranking city officials, during which she will call for the support of some 1,800 Korean companies operating there. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News, Hanoi.
The leaders of Korea and Vietnam are looking ahead to economic cooperation projects of the future. But how has the two countries' economic relationship developed over the past 2 decades? Our Hwang Jie gives us an overview of Seoul and Hanoi's expanding relations.
This year marks the 21st anniversary since Korea and Vietnam established diplomatic ties, and during that period, trade volume between the two nations has risen more than 40 times. Last year, bilateral trade volume stood at over $21 billion, making Vietnam Korea's 6th largest trading partner. Korea's main exports to Vietnam are mostly production parts for Korean companies that do business in Vietnam, while imports from Vietnam include products like shoes and clothing that Korean companies produce there. A surprising point here is that 36% of Korea's trade surplus came from Vietnam last year, meaning that a large number of Korean companies are heavily investing in the emerging economy. Around 2,700 Korean companies are engaged in more than 3,000 projects in Vietnam. Korea's total investment reached nearly $25 billion last year, and it stands as Vietnam's fourth largest investor nation following Japan, Taiwan, and Singapore. So for local companies, Vietnam is rising as the next frontier for investment, and this is due to the business climate there.
The Vietnamese domestic market is huge, with a population of more than 92 million. The country also has a good geopolitical location. It's near China and other Southeast Asian countries.
And experts say that Vietnam is politically stable compared to other emerging nations like Indonesia and differentiates itself from South American countries like Brazil in terms of labor force.
And their labor is quite diligent, and they are so eager to learn something more like in Korean people.
Following Monday's summit between Korea and Vietnam, free trade talks between the two countries are expected to speed up, which would build a foundation for even more companies to do business in the market. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
The two Koreas are back at the negotiating table on this Tuesday as they try to reach an agreement on just when to resume operations at their jointly run factory zone in the north. The second round of talks of the Joint Committee on the Kaesong Industrial Complex is currently underway in Kaesong, where officials are seeking ways to improve the management of the complex. The two sides have also so far reopened their military hotline, a key precondition for resuming operations at the factory zone, as it allows South Koreans to stay across the border for extended periods of time. If the talks go well on this Tuesday, experts say the factories in Kaesong may start running again before the Korean Thanksgiving holiday next week. Top nuclear envoys from South Korea and the United States have reiterated that North Korea must show a change in attitude before the six-party talks on the North's denuclearization can restart. Following an hour-long meeting in Seoul on this Tuesday, Jo Tae-yong and Glyn Davis said they held fruitful discussions on ways to deal with Pyongyang. Davies stressed that the North must show willingness to take steps it has already promised to take, adding that the six-party talks will not be productive when Pyongyang is trying to be accepted as a nuclear weapon state. The multilateral dialogue involving the two Koreas, the US, China, Russia and Japan, has been stalled since late 2008.
For the first time in South Korea's weightlifting history, a team of athletes from the South left for Pyongyang earlier today to participate in an international competition. A group of 41 South Koreans, including 22 weightlifters, will take part in the week-long Asian Cup and Asian Inter-Club Weightlifting Championships starting Wednesday. In line with recent easing of inter-Korean tensions, North Korea has agreed to allow the South Korean flag to be hoisted and the anthem played should the South win a medal at the event. The last time North Korea hosted an international sporting event was 14 years ago. Dennis Rodman, former NBA star and new best friend of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, has agreed to train North Korea's Olympic basketball team. Holding a press conference in New York City Monday, Rodman said he will go back to Pyongyang in December to help select North Korean players for the 2016 Olympics. He added that he hopes to have ex-NBA stars such as former Chicago teammate Scottie Pippen join him. Rodman, who has been to North Korea twice this year, revealed to The Guardian on Sunday that Kim Jong-un has a daughter named Jue with his wife Lee Seol-ju.
For your fill of Korean and international news, join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at Noon.
Session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
Former President John Doo-hwan has long claimed he has no money to pay the over $150 million in outstanding fines levied on him for corruption during his authoritarian rule in the 1980s. After the government's long and drawn-out search for assets allegedly hidden by the Chun family on behalf of the former president, the family has finally agreed to pay off the fines. Our Ji Myung-gil has the details.
The quest to recover the outstanding fines owed by disgraced former President Chun Doo-hwan may soon come to an end. Chun's family plans to give details on Tuesday how they will settle the more than $150 million in remaining fines he owes for corruption during his rule in the 1980s. The former dictator's eldest son, Chun Jae-guk, will give a news conference on behalf of his family at 3 p.m. Korea time. His father will not attend due to health reasons. The former president was ordered by the nation's top court in 1997 to return over $200 million to the state, which he illegally accumulated through bribery from conglomerates during his military-backed rule from 1980 to 1988. He has been slow to pay the remaining fines, claiming he was broke. Since May, the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office has led an investigation into the Chun family to search for assets they may have concealed through various means, including tax evasion on the former president's behalf. The Chun family's decision to pay the outstanding fines comes amidst stronger pressure from the government after former President Roh Tae-woo finally paid the $21 million in fines he had owed the state earlier this month. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
A new report shows 3 out of 4 Koreans think they're unable to climb the social ladder no matter how hard they try, with those in their 30s giving the most negative responses. Our Kim Min-ji explains what's behind the pessimism.
Lee Ho-bong, who is self-employed, went through all kinds of hardships for 20 years before becoming the owner of a small franchise. It was his belief that effort makes everything work that kept him going.
I started my business when I was 28 years old with only a few $100s. I tell my children to work hard and with passion.
Although hope can be a driving force in life sometimes, many Koreans these days are finding it hard to think positive. According to a survey by the Hyundai Research Institute, 75% of Koreans said that moving up social class will be difficult, regardless of how much effort they put in. Respondents in their 30s answered most pessimistically at about 80%, likely due to increased economic expenses after starting a new family and having been through the intense competition in the job market.
There are many opportunities for the people in the higher tier. For those stuck in the middle, there aren't many opportunities available even if they try hard.
The survey takers cited increased living expenses and unfair hiring practices as the main reasons for not being able to climb the social ladder. About 21% of the participants also said they have fallen in social class during the past year, while only 2% said they have moved up the ladder.
If more people think moving up social class is difficult, they will put in less effort, and thus the dynamics of the economy will fall. Tensions could also rise between the different social classes.
Experts say the government needs to strengthen public education, reduce housing expenses, and create stable jobs in order to provide a bridge for citizens to move up in the world. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Unionized workers from Korea's largest automaker, Hyundai Motor, voted in favor of an annual wage deal on Tuesday, putting an end to a series of scheduled strikes at the company's assembly line. The vote comes after management and union negotiators agreed last week on a 5% raise in basic monthly pay and other bonus incentives, along with improved social benefits. So the more than 100-day-long negotiation has come to an end, but some experts point out their almost annual walkouts at the firm's domestic production line need to be brought under control. This year, the union's occasional strikes since August have caused Hyundai Motor production losses totaling more than 1 trillion won, or $920 million.
The Korean government has slapped an import ban on all fisheries products from Japan's Fukushima and surrounding regions. But the measure has so far failed to put consumers at ease. Our Yoo An reports.
This is a pollock soup restaurant in Seoul. It used to do a roaring trade with customers lining up outside during office lunch hours.
I used to like those pollock soups a lot, but because of the radiation problem, I'm staying away from them. That's why I'm eating kimchi stew right now.
Some stores have even decided to strike pollock soup completely off the menu.
Because of the effects of the Fukushima accident, there are fewer customers. They eat sausage and squid instead of pollock.
The government expanded its import ban on Japan's fisheries products to include imports from radiation-hit Fukushima and 7 other adjacent prefectures just last week. But it wasn't enough to quash consumers' fears.
It takes a lot of time and information, as well as strengthened measures to rebuild public trust, especially when everyone is already extremely worried. But these measures in turn could also be a source of creating more distrust.
In an attempt to stamp out suspicions, the government is looking into creating a joint committee of research centers and consumer organizations to reveal detailed information on the inspection results of the seawater surrounding the Korean peninsula. Yurian, Arirang News.
Over in Japan, Fukushima plant operator TEPCO has questioned the credibility of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's recent assurances to the International Olympic Committee that the radioactive water leak at the plant is completely under control. The Japanese media say, when asked by reporters if TEPCO could back the Prime Minister's claims, a company official answered that the operator asked the Japanese government to explain itself. The operator added the barrier wall and underwater fence around the plant cannot completely contain the water. In the latest survey by Japanese daily Asahi Shimbun, 95% of Japanese citizens said they consider the situation at Fukushima to be serious. The conflict between China and Japan over a group of islands in the East China Sea is heading into its second year after Japan bought the islands from a private owner. Both sides have since stepped up their rhetoric and may even be laying out plans to land on the islands this year. Our Kim Ji-yeon has more.
The territorial conflict between China and Japan over a group of islands in the East China Sea, known as Senkaku in Japan and Diaoyu in China, will be 1 year old on Tuesday. The nationalization of the islands by Japan last year took the conflict to the next level, and it looks as if neither side is backing down. The administration of Xi Jinping in China seems to be taking a harder line on the issue than before. In April, China sent some 40 combat aircraft, including the Suoi-27 and Suoi-30, to the islands. During the G20 summit last week in St. Petersburg, the Chinese premier told Prime Minister Shinzo Abe that Japan should try to see history in the right light in order to resolve bilateral disputes and use that as a basis for future relations. Ultimately, China wants Japan to admit that there is a dispute over the islands and to sit down for talks on the matter. But Japan has largely pushed these demands aside. Abe, who is in Buenos Aires, said Monday that the islands have always belonged to Japan. And now, following successive victories in the general elections last year and the upper house elections in July, Abe seems to be using the public support to harden his position on the islands. The Abe administration has raised its defense budget for next year, which includes a contingency plan for a potential conflict over the islands, and said it may put troops on the islands to protect them. The question of whether the Japanese self-defense forces can land on the islands is a sensitive one, since the military has a constitutional mandate for self-defense only. Now, with both sides stepping their rhetoric on the islands, experts are now speculating whether China will land on the islands this year. Chinese activists have landed on the islands in the past, but there has never been an official attempt by China. However, the Chinese State Bureau of Survey and Mapping has repeatedly stated that it will send officials to the islands this year. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
A Russian offer to put the Syrian government's chemical weapons under international control may have provided an exit strategy for US President Barack Obama. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The United States says it's going to closely examine Russia's proposal of putting Syria's chemical weapons under international control.
We want to take a hard look at the proposal. We'll obviously discuss the idea with the Russians. And of course, we would welcome a decision and action by Syria to give up its chemical weapons.
In an interview with CNN Monday, President Obama said the Russians' proposal was a potentially positive development.
If we can exhaust these diplomatic efforts and come up with a formula that gives the international community a verifiable, enforceable mechanism to deal with these chemical weapons in Syria, then I'm all for it. But
Russia's proposal comes in the context of imminent U.S. military action. The U.S. government says it is still skeptical and will have to wait and see if Syria follows through with the disbandment of its chemical weapons. Government officials say it's important to keep pressure on Syria and give the president the authority he requested. UN Security General Park Geun-hye plans to urge the Security Council to demand the Syrian government hand over its chemical weapons.
I'm considering urging the Security Council to demand the immediate transfer of Syria's chemical weapons and chemical precursor stocks to places inside Syria where they can be safely stored and destroyed.
Russia's proposal came a matter of hours after U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry emphasized that the only way Syria could sidestep military intervention will be to forfeit all its chemical weapons.
He could turn over every single bit of his chemical weapons to the international community in the next week. Turn it over, all of it, without delay, and allow a full and total accounting for that.
Syria's foreign minister welcomed Russia's proposal to put the country's chemical weapons stockpile under international control, but stopped short of saying explicitly if Syria would carry it out.
I state that the Syrian Arab Republic welcomes the Russian initiative, motivated by the Syrian leadership's concern for the lives of our citizens and the security of our country.
Meanwhile, the Senate has put its vote on authorizing military intervention in Syria on hold in response to Moscow's proposal. Senators were originally set to vote on Wednesday. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Google, Yahoo and Facebook have teamed up to demand the U.S. government increase transparency, accountability and respect civil liberties and human rights. The three companies together filed a suit against the U.S. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court on Monday in protest of the restrictions of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and the National Security Letters, which allows Washington to demand information on U.S. citizens and prevent the firms from even discussing the data requests. Facebook says there needs to be a greater debate on about whether government security programs sufficiently balance privacy interests when attempting to keep the public safe.
And let's now get an update on the forecast with our Lee Ji-yeon standing by at the Weather Center here at Arirang. Good afternoon to you, Ji-yeon.
Well, good afternoon, guys. Now, yesterday we talked about the importance of washing your hands with soap to stop getting you sick. Remember?
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, I remember that,
yeah. But once you caught a cold, what bothers you guys the most?
It's usually the runny nose, and or the stuffed up nose that bothers me the most.
Right, I actually have both of those today. And a sore throat too, which is pretty bad. You know, they're all pretty bad symptoms, of course. Most people get them. But I think having a runny nose and a sore throat are pretty unpleasant, the most unpleasant. What do you think, Ji-yeon?
Well, I think so too, and I hate them as well. So let me give you a couple of tips that we can try before seeing a doctor. For a stuffy nose, a warm foot bath is supposed to help us improve blood circulation, and this will relieve the symptom of nasal congestion. And for a throat problem, moisturizing your throat can be helpful, so drink warm water or lemon honey tea frequently. By the way, doesn't lemon honey tea sound great on a cloudy day like today? We're looking at overcast skies in most regions, and afternoon highs are only making into the mid-20s. Well, this is because, as we can see, the dark clouds are covering up the nations. It's blocking the sunshine, but later on, even a low pressure from the west will trigger some showers to Seoul, Gyeonggi, and Chungcheong province in the afternoon, but it won't be that heavy at all. Now, tomorrow is gonna be a rainy day for most regions, and you you might wonder if this rain will bring cooler temperatures to the nation. Well, not this time. Tomorrow and Thursday, we are going to have a cooler afternoon, but on Friday, temperatures will be right back to levels seen over the last couple of weeks. Well, it's breezy right now, so let's take a look at today's readings. Daytime highs in Seoul will rise to 25 degrees Celsius, that's 77 degrees in Fahrenheit, and afternoon highs in Daegu and Gwangju, Busan will all get up into 27. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju will also top out at 27, while Mount Kumgang will be 10 degrees lower than Jeju at 17. Now that's all I have for you today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and back to Mark and Yusan in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Jiyeon, for your weather and tips too about how to deal with a common cold. Very useful indeed. And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
And Mark and I will be back tomorrow for up-to-the-minute news coverage on Newsline at Noon.